am Denise Beach. I am the Public Health Director for Hopkins County Department. I am a registered nurse. I was Director of Nursing here for about 13 years and then Public Health Director for about 13 years. I still am always very involved in clinical, and I've been kind of the clinical lead for the Kentucky Health Department Association with the directors. Everybody kind of has our niche, and we share our areas that we're most confident in, and clinic is probably my most confident area. So I'll just get started. Going to go through some basics on consent and then just let you all ask questions. I'll do my best to answer them. If I don't know something, then I'll try to get back with you. I'm retiring tomorrow at 4:30, so I will have to get back to you quickly. And then we'll go from there, okay? I'm going to share my screen and do a little PowerPoint and then take questions. And then you go, oh, it doesn't matter though. Okay. Sometimes I always have to have a little bit of help with my computer. We're going to talk about medical records and consent. And the agenda is basically who can receive medical records, medical facility with a written agreement can, patients or parents with parental rights or custody can, third-party payers through insurance, Medicaid, a medical facility needing childhood immunizations, and whomever has a court order subpoena signed by a judge, WIC with another WIC site, and just remember, do not release STI, HIV, hands, substance abuse, mental health, or demographics. And this is from page 25 and 36 of the AR on medical records. Now, with parental rights, that sometimes gets into some issues because, like, maybe mom and dad are separated and dad brings them in and he decides to get immunizations, but the mom didn't want him to have immunizations. But in reality, whichever parent brings them in, if they have not lost custodial rights and you all do not know that or have record of it, then you can do what the parent who brings them in who still has custodial rights ask you to do. They all have parental rights. There is no, exception that the mom always has parental rights over the dad. So that's something to just remember when you're having patients come in. POAs and caregiver affidavits. What are these? A power of attorney. A parent or judge may give power of attorney to DCBS or a family member or another caregiver. This gives all rights of care to care of the child. So this gives all rights if the judge declares a power of attorney. There's also something called a caregiver affidavit, and this is if a caregiver is left with a child and is unable to find or reach the parent. They may sign a caregiver affidavit for health treatment and school-related decisions only. The caregiver must have this renewed annually. And when this tends to happen is grandmother, grandfather, aunt, a child is left with them and the parent goes somewhere else. We had one go to Texas and left the children with the grandparent, and they had to get a caregiver affidavit to provide school and health care for this child because they could not reach the parent. The other time that we've seen this is when the parents are in jail. They may not have actually lost custody, but the caregiver may not have access to them to get this signed. And so they just go ahead and acknowledge that they have been left with the child and the child is being cared for, and DCBS is not involved. The care is fine. You don't have a DCBS case. They've left their children with a responsible adult, but the caregiver needs to have something and for some reason cannot be in touch or have the parent sign. DCBS. When DCBS gets involved, there are several caveats to that. If DCBS has an ongoing investigation, an RN may answer questions or allow inspections of the records. Okay? Copies may only be given with a court order or release from a parent. So if a parent still has custody, they can sign a release, or if the parent is not signing a release, then you have to have a court order, a signed subpoena or a court order from a judge. We can report to DCBS if we suspect abuse. So we can, of course, do a report, but that is not giving records. Temporary or emergency custody. DCBS authorizes emergency care only if a parent or judge cannot be located. The parent or judge can give blanket consent for services, and DCBS cannot consent for invasive procedures in these instances, and these require parental or judicial consent. There aren't many things in public health that we're going to get concerned with a temporary or emergency custody. DCBS commitment comes up as something that happens frequently and that we have to work through, and I'm sure all of you do. If a child is committed, then DCBS is acting in place of the parent with full parental authority. They can commit for all medical treatment. DCBS caseworker or supervisor consents to all medical services. There is a caveat here, because there's always an exception, that foster parents, placement providers, they cannot just sign consents, except with a DPP 106A, which DCBS signs, and DCBS is still the one giving consent for routine health care. So they're the ones signing the consent, but then they allow the foster parent to bring in and sign consents for us. And this is only if a cabinet representative cannot be located. Well, my take is that there's really no reason in public health, when we're only open 8 to 4:30 and do routine services, that we should be using a DPP 106A, because cabinet representatives at DCBS, somebody's always going to be at DCBS when we're available. Okay? So that would be more something that would happen in the emergency department. So in general, foster parents don't need to be signing consents. If a parent still has parental rights but not custody, this gets confusing to even DCBS sometimes. We've had workers say, well, the judge said that the parent still gets to see the children and they can come with the caseworker to the appointments, etc. The caseworker must still sign the consent. So if the parent's allowed to come to the medical visits at the health department, but they're under DCBS commitment, even if the parent is there, the DCBS worker needs to sign. The parent does not have parental authority at that point. DCBS will need to be asked if they're committed. The CHFS authorization for health care, and that is the DPP 106A. It is an authorization for health care. A family services supervisor must sign, so DCBS still has to sign because they have to sign this. The parent caregiver should not sign. A parent cannot give authority. If a child is under DCBS commitment, then it has to be DCBS that signs this. It only authorizes routine health care, and it may only be used when a DCBS representative cannot be located. Again, we're Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30 with holidays off. I don't really see a reason to utilize this unless you had to, because then you're going to have to make notes that you absolutely cannot reach a DCBS representative. May be used in voluntary commitment, temporary or emergency custody, commitment or explanation of treatment to a minor, although the minor cannot sign consent. A minor can sign consent for their child, but then their worker must sign for consent for their care. Like if say a 15-year-old has a child, they can sign consent for their child, but the DCBS worker would still have to sign for their care if they're under commitment. Routine health care. These are the things that are considered routine health care. Preventive care measures such as physicals, simple lab tests, not HIV or AIDS, it's listed specifically, immunizations, treatment of communicable diseases, non-invasive radiology procedures, routine suturing of minor lacerations, routine dental care, and other medical procedures not listed but generally governed by applied consent guidelines in the community. That would be in an emergency. You know, if a child, implied consent is usually if somebody passes out on the sidewalk and they reach medical care and they are not unable to verbalize or work with the medical providers, then that is where applied consent would come in. WIC is a little different. The parent can give proxy for WIC. DCBS can give proxy if parent loses custody. So this is where a DCBS worker can actually give true proxy to a parent. For WIC, they can do that. Foster parents can be given proxy. Appointments, WIC patients need to receive appointments when they call, and we can follow up with DCBS if needed before appointment or even during appointment. That's been more for my staff because sometimes I've had them say, well, we'll call you back because they're like, well, I don't, nobody has proxy right now. And, foster parent's going to be bringing them in. And I always say, don't delay their WIC appointment. Go ahead and make the appointment. Then start working toward getting these proxies taken care of. And if you don't, they can come on in because if you just find out right before the appointment, because during the appointment that needs to be before the patient comes back, we need to try to find somebody at DCBS to give the proxy. These are some of the main, I know that's kind of easy, but I think questions might be where we're at because nothing is ever as clear as that when you're dealing with consent. And so what I'll do is try to answer some of your questions about consent and DCBS. And I'm going to tell you something. I have taken this at one time all the way up to the council at the Kentucky Health and Family Services. I've taken it up to legal counsel that's over DCBS. So I have done that in the past, and then I tried to put some of the KAR and KRS under the slides. But, there's always things that come up that are a little different or things that we have to work through. One thing I can tell you is that sometimes you get a DCBS worker, or I should say it happens kind of frequently sometimes. If you have much turnover, they don't often understand this, just like they will tell you you can give a copy of medical records because they've got an ongoing investigation. And in reality, they can ask you questions during an ongoing investigation, or they can review the records. But you do have to have a signed consent from either the parent or a judge to actually give medical records. And don't always, you have to go by your nursing license too and your health department protocols, because that DCBS person may not be well versed on this, especially if there's been turnover and they're new. I've had them tell me, the foster parent can just sign even without a DPP 106A, or even when, you're very readily getting in touch with them because you're talking to them and they're telling you foster parents can sign. And I'm like, no, DCBS has to sign. So do I have some questions about these issues?
Denise?
Yes.
This is Angie from Lake Cumberland District Health Department. I had a question for you. On your first slide that you sent, it said you cannot release STI, HIV, hands. If they specifically ask for that, you can release that, correct?
If it's specifically on the parent's release, if they've got custody or it's on the judge or the subpoena or the court order by the judge and it's signed and it specifically lists that, yes, you can.
Okay. What about for continued care? Like if it's another office that's needing records for continued care, can you release that or do they have to specifically state that also on there?
If you have referred a patient, like we had a syphilis case that had secondary syphilis and then he had something else going on, and we referred him to an office and I released his information to go with him for continuity of care. If you are referring or somebody has referred a patient to you for these issues, then that is continuity of care.
Okay.
And give them the results. Also, immunizations are released to healthcare facilities if they're needing them for school. They can be released to schools and they can be released to health departments.
When people call in for to get immunizations, we've had several people call like that has moved out of state. How do you handle that? Do you have them to sign do you email them something to sign? Or I didn't know how to do that now that, they can get onto KYR and print their own, but some of them isn't in there. So I didn't know how to do that.
If they're on KYR, then we certainly try to explain to them and help them work through that. Otherwise, if it's a parent wanting immunization release, then we do find a way to send them a release and they have to send a release back to us if they can't get on KYR. It's only for medical facilities or schools or healthcare facilities giving immunizations that you can release immunizations without a consent.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. See, I got some things in the chat room. If someone has a POA, can they do all things for a child? A POA gives them full power of attorney for that child's care. If a minor gives birth, I was always told they were emancipated in Kentucky and could sign consent for themselves. Is that not the case anymore? What I was told is, and looking through things, is that minor, if they're in DCBS custody, then DCBS does still have to consent for them. And so what I was answering there is if they're in DCBS custody, they're not emancipated.
So Denise, this is Glenda with Lincoln Trail.
Uh-huh.
I was getting that one confused that we're talking about now with that KRS 214.185 in the administrative reference on page 2. And it said a patient is under 18 years of age, unmarried, and has born or fathered a child. They can give consent for services for their child and himself or herself. So that only pertains if they are you saying that only pertains if they're not in DCBS custody?
That's the way that I have understood it when I have went through and asked that question, but I will make a double check on that. Yes, at that point, I was talking about when they're in DCBS custody.
Okay. Because it doesn't really specify either way in the administrative reference, whether it is or is not DCBS custody.
Okay. I'll check on that, but I'm pretty sure when I was speaking to that, I was talking about a minor that is in DCBS custody, not an emancipated minor, married, living on their own, raising their child. I've always considered them emancipated here if they're not in DCBS custody.
Even if they are not married and maybe still living with their parents?
Yeah, I was giving an example. If they're taking care of their own child and the court's not involved or anything like that, I would consider them emancipated, but I'm gonna double check on that again.
Okay,
that always comes up, and it could have been a while since I've checked, so I always like to make sure that I've went back through something. So I'll check with our attorney.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Can you have a copy of my PowerPoint? Sure. We received letters from DCBS workers giving consent to foster families for permission to bring a child in for any service. Are those able to be used? I would not use them because it very clearly says that DCBS has to sign if they're committed. If they're not committed, the parent has to sign a release. If they're just bringing a letter in, that does not cover you. The only way would be to have the DPP 106A and be in a health department open during the day. The only reason that you can utilize that is all four of the types, voluntary, temporary, emergency commitment, or explanation of treatment to a minor, all say only if a cabinet representative cannot be contacted. And to me, that would be at night or the weekend. And then you still have to have that DPP 106A signed to be able to do that.
Denise, do y'all
Yes.
have an 800 number to get a hold of y'all's DCBS workers? Because I'm here to tell you, we'll call and call and call, and sometimes we don't get an answer or we're on hold for a few hours. So in our area, it's really very hard to just contact a DCBS worker.
We've driven down there.
Yeah. That's something that we probably wouldn't have the choice to do, but that's something we do come across a whole lot is they're not easy to contact by phone.
But you would still have to have the DPP 106A. So if you don't have that, not being able to contact them, it would still not work really. So yes, we have had all sorts of problems with this. So we are right with you. I totally understand where you're coming from. And we have driven down there and walked in to get a consent sign. And they really, I know they're busy and they've got a really tough job. And then they do have quite a bit of turnover. So it is difficult to make sure they all understand that we have to have this. So, we really try, if we know that somebody's in custody, we really try to start from the time period the appointment's made because, yes, it is very difficult. We do accept faxes now from them. If it's from DCBS fax number, we will accept. When I started, because, I've been here a long time, we did not accept faxes back then. It had to be an original, but we do accept faxes or even emailed consents from DCBS. So that helps them some.
It does, yes, and knowing ahead of time, but I'm just remembering the phone calls, that's not easy for us.
And we have difficulty too. I do understand that. But then you got to also worry about, like I said, your nursing license. Remember, DCBS isn't covering you for anything. You've got to have consent. I have never, let's see, can we give a copy of the immunization certificate to DCBS workers without a release or court order? I've never seen that. It always specifies that it's for the use for schools or health departments or for continued care. You should be able to get a parental consent if they're not committed, or DCBS just has to sign a consent, a release of information to get a copy of that. But I would not think you could just automatically release that. But I'll check on that. I'll check on that too.
Yeah, Denise, this is Glenda again. If you could check on that, because what we have routinely done, I thought that was under like a police investigation or, DCBS investigation. What we have typically done in the past, if we had a letter from a social worker that is signed and they say they have a case investigation in progress, then we have released records to them because of a case investigation for abuse or neglect. So is there a certain KRS or somewhere that cites more specifics on that?
Hold on just a minute. In the AR page 3 and 4 on medical records, if it hasn't changed, but that's where I got it. And then also I have went to the Deputy General Counsel Office of Legal Services at CHFS about this before.
Okay.
So a letter is not the same as a court order or parental consent And they are not, you can show them the immunizations, but you're not supposed to give them records without a court order or parental release of information.
So they can view it, but they can't get a copy.
That's what I've always been taught. And I do have I went all the way up to the Deputy General Counsel before about giving out records to DCBS during an investigation. And I was told just what I had been taught back before, when people that are now retired taught me that it had to, I know, that it had to be, you had to have a court order or a judge sign for records, even during the ongoing investigation. But you could answer their questions and let them review anything, but to give out medical records. And I have never been told or read anything that said immunization release can go directly to them. You know, I personally think it should be able to be in the release part, but I'll do a little more investigation on that.
And if they could put that in the administrative reference, that would be very helpful to give really clear guidance in that.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So basically, we want to know a little more about emancipation, because like I was always taught they were emancipated too, but under DCBS, the reading says that they have to be, if they're in custody, then DCBS has to sign for the parent, and then on immunization release to DCBS. So.
Denise, I have a question, please. This is Jessica Preston from Lincoln Trail. Okay, so what do you do in the situation when you have a couple or a married couple in the midst of a bitter divorce, and both of them have parental rights to the child? The parental rights for the father has not been terminated, or the mother. Their divorce or upcoming divorce or situation is so contentious that the child is being exchanged at a police department. So mom is a WIC participant with the child, but dad calls and wants to know the appointment or something, but he has not lost parental rights. It's more of a safety thing, but I want to know what you think about that situation.
You don't have the right to withhold from a custodial parent the information about an appointment, and he can bring the child in and make the same decisions unless he's lost parenting rights, custodial rights. I tell my people, we don't get in the middle of divorces. If they've got any kind of safety issue, they need to go get an order from the court for a protective order for them and the child. We cannot get in if there's no, if rights have not been taken away from either parent. You can tell the mom, we have to answer either parent's issues, and either parent can sign for release.
Okay, thank you.
I am not an attorney. I'm a straight up nurse and healthcare administrator. So I will tell you that. I'm going to say that I'm not really giving legal advice. I'm giving experience over what has happened to me in 26 years. So if you want attorney advice, Sarah Jo can get you that.
I was just wondering, even if you think the safety of the mother or child would be in danger, but we cannot withhold that information about an appointment or anything if the parent has not lost their rights. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes. Now, if you think somebody's safety is compromised, then it's your responsibility to report to DCBS. So anytime you think that, if you suspect, and I'm not just hearsay, but if you suspect that safety is an issue for that child, then you need to contact DCBS. And if you think the mom's safety is compromised, then you need to talk to her about either contacting the police or allowing you to help her do that. But adults can make that decision on if they want to contact the police or not. Because sometimes, you can get them into worse situations. But with a child, if you think that child has safety issues, you need to call DCBS yourself and get that taken care of.
No,
But
not so much for the child, more for the parent, the mother. Like, no, the mother is not allowing the father to know her whereabouts or her ex to know her whereabouts, but he's not lost custody or any parental rights of the child. He's calling, wanting to know the next WIC appointment for the child, but that may put the mother in danger. I guess that's what
Yeah.
the question.
That would not be your responsibility. That you would tell the mother that if she's concerned about that, she needs to contact the police and get a protective order. But you cannot withhold from a custodial parent information about their child.
Okay, so random call to the health department. Dad wants to know, then we give them that information. And then we notify the mom that we've given it to him. Like, mom's not present when dad's calling for this information. So
what do you do for any other patient? Do you notify other people when they ask about their appointment? No.
Okay. I'm just trying to get a clear view on that situation. Okay.
I understand your concern, but really mom has a responsibility here to get a protective order or reach out to the police. And you can encourage that. Hey, if you're scared, you need to do this. But if dad calls here and he hasn't lost parental rights, he has a right to know when his children's appointment is, and he has a right to get medical records or to bring them in for treatment and care, unless you have a court document stating that he is not allowed to be around them when you're at the health department.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I know it's hard sometimes, but you are not the police, and you just have to go by what your recommendations and rules are about it. But if they haven't lost rights, you can't. That would be you withholding parental rights from him.
Yes, I understand. It's a complicated situation. Yes, but thank you. I'm hearing what you're telling me. So thank you. I appreciate it.
It is difficult. Anything else? Okay.
Denise, I have one other question. It's Glenda again. The DPP 106A, if that is signed by a social worker already, do you still need to get another signature from the social worker for,
I
say,
think it lasts for a year. Let's see, I got one here. Most of these kind of forms last for a year.
okay. So you wouldn't have to contact the social worker for another signature for an immunization, for example.
I would, because it says you can only utilize this to get your consent signed if you can't reach a social worker. So this doesn't give you blanket. It's telling you that if you can't reach somebody at DCBS, if you cannot get in touch with anybody, it says if you cannot get in touch with a cabinet representative, the placement provider may authorize the medical care if you have this on file. But so that tells me you have to at least try to get in touch with a DCBS representative. This is giving you permission that if you can't get in touch with them,
Okay.
so you should still try to get in touch with them.
So you definitely want to document it. If you tried it and you still couldn't, then you're using the DPP 106A, then you document that.
What I would do.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks.
Is this a constant problem for you guys?
Yes.
We've been through every kind of scenario. I mean, it's like my nursing supervisor, she'll say, I think I know it, and then this will happen. There's always something around consent and DCBS and all these kinds of things. It's not an easy thing. And as you can see, I still go, well, let me think about that one. So let me look that up. And over the years, I've went everywhere I can go with some of this because it is hard to decipher sometimes what the intent is.
Denise, I kind of had the same question that Allison had just put in the chat. The yellow CH5 WIC forms, who is able to sign that for WIC?
The yellow CH5 WIC form. I don't know the form colors anymore because I've been director for 13 years. So I know the bigger rules, but what is that consenting to?
So that is only consenting for WIC. That is the only thing that foster parent can do with that registration form is WIC only.
If it's their WIC, if they've got a proxy from either the parent, if the parent had custody, or DCBS, DCBS can just give WIC rights straight to the foster. They can proxy straight to the foster, and the foster can sign for WIC.
Okay.
Yes.
And with that, Denise, how do we need to go about getting that proxy from the social worker?
Like if somebody comes in, a foster parent comes in and they don't have proxy,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to call DCBS and get their caseworker or the caseworker supervisor and get
Okay.
signed to give them proxy. They've got to do just like anybody else that would be given proxy.
Okay.
Got to sign that. And then the foster parent can have proxy. And just like any other person that has proxy. And remember, the pronto is still covered under this, but if you're going to do a hemoglobin with a finger stick, it goes under medical care because it is invasive. So I would consider it medical care.
Okay. And for that, when they're in temporary or emergency custody, we would have to send over the registration for the judge or the social worker to sign.
Well, a judge isn't going to sign that type of thing. They're just going to sign that DCBS can
sign that for us.
They're going to sign that DCBS can sign. They're not going to sign your general consents for things typically. But yes, DCBS will need to sign those consents. They will need to have the ability to sign those consents. And let's see, I had that up there. I don't think I have that up there. But yeah, they have to go back under medical care when it's a finger stick.
But with that, medical care is still routine care, what we do, correct? Like if it's an invasive procedure such as a finger stick or a shot.
Yes, because it would be considered a simple lab test. So it would be under routine care.
Okay, thank you.
Non-routine care is things like surgical treatment. So, but a simple lab test is still routine care. Somebody said for all visits, we should be obtaining signatures from the judge. No, no, no. The judge just has to sign if you're going to give medical records or that they are committed to DCBS. So it's DCBS that needs to sign prior to their appointments. Can we release records that we received from another facility to a patient who requests their own records? And can we release nurses' notes? These are some things I was never educated on, but have been told and just wanted to be sure. I wouldn't release records from another facility. I would tell them they need to go to that facility. Like if you get records from somebody else, then you don't really have the right to release another entity's records. You need to ask them to get their records from that facility. And can we release nurses' notes? Yes, nurses' notes are part of the record. If they have a release of records, then nurses' notes would be included. I'm going to send to everyone on the call. I'm going to make sure that Sarah Jo or Glendon has my, but I'm retiring, so I'm going to put Bernice Crook, the new director's email, and then we have lunch frequently, and so she's going to ask me. So there. I won't have an email address, but I will try to get this sent out before I leave. What about the immunization one for vaccines, for DCBS specific signature on that specific form? If you need forms signed and they're in DCBS commitment, they need to sign all the forms. I'd be especially careful with immunizations because I just did my dissertation on vaccine hesitancy, and that is one of the biggest issues right now. And to me, that could be a very litigious area. And so I would definitely want to get the proper signatures on the immunization one. You can ask me how I feel about vaccine hesitance if you want. I just spent 2 years doing a dissertation on it. I am not a fan. Any other questions? Okay.
Denise,
Yes.
I do have one, and this kind of goes back to the judge and the social worker. I'm fairly new to this position, so I just want to make sure. So if the child is in like a temporary or emergency custody, do we have to obtain something from the social worker that the judge has given them stating that they are able to make those medical decisions?
If they are in, let's see, temporary custody. Hold on. Okay. If they're in temporary or emergency custody, DCBS authorizes emergency care only if a parent or judge cannot be located. So see, a parent can still give consent if it's only temporary or emergency custody. And then if the parent's not available and it's temporary or emergency custody, then it would need to be a judge.
Okay. And so with that, is that something that they would do verbally? Because I wouldn't assume like the parent would come with the foster parent that has the child, but can we do that verbally, or does the parent need to come in and sign those papers?
I don't take verbal consents.
Okay.
I don't recommend you do either. If you go to court with a verbal consent, you are not going to win, in my opinion. Again, not a lawyer. But I would not risk my nursing license by giving any kind of care to somebody with a verbal consent. And then DCBS cannot consent for invasive procedures if it's temporary or emergency custody. So even the finger stick, they can't do that if it's temporary or emergency custody. And these require parental or judicial consent for those. So Temporary emergency, it should be just a short window time period, and hopefully they won't just have to need their immunizations right during that time frame. So you don't see as many of these for what we do. Now, many moons ago, I was director of nursing for what's now Baptist Health, Madisonville, and we saw this kind of stuff because they were sick. But, you know, a lot of kids shouldn't be coming in during a traumatic time period in their life like this, and temporary emergency custody should be short term. That's not the best time to take them in to get their immunizations and things like that. But it happens. We've had it. So just be careful that the parent can still give consent, but I would not do a verbal consent, no.
Okay, thank you.
So welcome. Anything else? Okay. I will try to get the couple of questions that I kind of had hesitancy on back to you before I retire tomorrow at 4:30. Glenda, I'll send them to you. Will that work? Okay.
Yes, thank you very much for doing this presentation too. I appreciate it.
I wish I could tell y'all that you can just learn it and it's super easy, but there's a lot of discretion that goes into this, and a lot of this has been because I went all the way up to different channels doing this over the years. It's not just something that's easy to read and know exactly, and you will get different viewpoints. And again, unless you've been up in the hierarchy, like to the Deputy General Counsel, sometimes DCBS, you know, they're new, they've been there 6 months and things, and they may get a little confused on it too, and we'll try to give them grace because it is a hard job and there is turnover. So it's complicated, but always protect your nursing license and your facility. All righty. Thank you all.
Thank you.